I attempted my first ever hardcore Pokemon Nuzlocke on the absolute franchise classic that is Pokemon Emerald. It's easily in my top 3 Pokemon games of all time, and at times I still feel like it might be the best all-around game that Game Freak ever created in terms of in-game content, relative to the time period, of course. Not only that, but Emerald is the first game that I managed to successfully shiny hunt a starter by soft resetting. With all that being said, I think it was a no-brainer to choose Emerald as my first foray into the Nuzlocke world. The rules I used for this run are right here, and they will also be posted in the description. Now without further ado, let's dive in. The run starts off the same as any other Hoenn playthrough, with us having to save Professor Birch's sorry ass from the tyranny of a Zigzagoon. I really had no idea which starter I wanted to use since all of them are viable in their own regard, but I opted for Torchic to make the early game a bit more challenging for myself. Our little chicken here will be one of the keys to success in the late game if he can stay alive, but we won't have to worry about him kicking the bucket just yet. After our initial battle, I gave Torchic an Elite movie reference for a nickname. Then I made my way up north to meet with May to give her one of her annual ass kickings that she'll be getting throughout the run. Also, none of the wild encounters I got on the way count for anything, since the Nuzlocke technically doesn't start until we receive Pokeballs for the first time. But we didn't stay in pre-Nuzlocke mode for long. Pretty soon afterwards on Route 101, we were able to start building our team with this Wurmple, which is what I would be able to say if I actually had it. But you know what? It's fine. Everything is just fine. You know why? We just go to Route 103, we see a Wingull, and then we catch the Wingull. It's that simple. Everyone meet Peep-E. Yeah, I won't lie, nicknaming Pokemon just isn't my strong suit, so you're all gonna have to just lower your expectations a little bit for me. The next encounter is a Wurmple that I'm actually able to catch this time. And next up, I was hoping to snag a Taillow just before Petalburg Woods, but it looks like the dogs were on the loose and decimated the local bird population around here. Our Petalburg Woods encounter was a Slack-Off of all things, which I didn't really know how to feel considering I actually never have used a Slacking in all of my years playing Emerald and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. And let's say this run actually allowed the Slack-Off line to leave a very good first impression on me. Our final encounter before battling Roxanne was this Nincada from outside Rustboro. Definitely some potential with this little fella, but he won't be too useful for us right now. Away we go into our first gym battle with the lead of none other than Peep-E. She absolutely destroyed the first Geodude with a water gun, and Roxanne's second Geodude met the same fate. But when those paths came out, I was like, damn, I actually have no way to deal with this guy right now. Now in reality, I was just too lazy to think of a game plan beforehand. Because I've got cojones that I need to haul around in a wheelbarrow, I decided to risk Peep-E's life and ground those paths just to give the rest of my team a chance. By the grace of God, or whatever you do or don't believe in, she actually survived, which allowed me to switch into Ken. Unfortunately, Ken wouldn't be so lucky. His sole purpose in life is to just use sand attacks to reduce Nose Pass's accuracy to give my team a better chance. Once I had used 3 sand attacks, I felt as though it was time to shift into more of an offensive gear. Because all Dark-type moves are special in Gen 3, Ken's Bites bypass all of Nose Pass's defense boost that it gained. We were able to proc Nose Pass's Auron Berry at the cost of being trapped by Block. Thus, Ken's fate was sealed. He wouldn't be leaving this battle alive. After Roxanne healed her duck-billed rock, I used one more sand attack just to be on the safe side. I figured at this point, I might be able to skate out of here with my whole team intact, but that hope was quickly set aflame when Ken died to a critical hit tackle. The only other team members with super effective moves were Gretchen and Peepee, and I really did not want to lose Wingull this early into the run because she'd be very valuable for the Broadly fight. So I opted for Gretchen, and I just prayed that Nose Pass would miss all of its rock tombs. And my prayers were answered. Nose Pass missed every single attack, and Gretchen was finally able to cap off the battle with one last Absorb. A pretty shaky first gym battle, not my best performance to start off. I mean, since that first gym battle took about 4 minutes up, I'm definitely not going to make that mistake the rest of the video, and I'm just going to try to speed things up a little bit. By the way, here's Wilma the Whismer. I should also mention now that none of the rival fights were a challenge in any way, shape, or form, so from this point onwards, it will be as though May never existed. After making landfall on the salty shores of Dewfur Town, I was excited to get into Granite Cave to our next encounter. Unfortunately, my excitement was a little misguided, but at least this Zubat will help us reroll some later encounters. Into the fight against Brawly, and I decided my best bet was to lead with my Kickin' Chicken. We strike first with Peck, which does just over half of Machop's health. He used Bulk Up, so I doubted another Peck would kill. And Ember on the following turn made simple work of Brawly's lead. Next up is Meditite, who is not worth wasting oxygen over. He is literally a free kill. Makuhita, on the other hand, is anything but a pushover and requires a little bit more finesse. I elected for Growl, but in hindsight, I should have just started to get some damage off as early as possible. The mistake was amplified even further when I saw how little damage we did compared to Makuhita. But then I had a big brain moment of epic proportions. I was like, hey, what if I just send in my Pokemon that absolutely walls Makuhita defensively? There's no way I can screw this up. Yep, definitely no way to mess it up. Not at all. At this point, I was freaking out a little bit because I forgot if Makuhita was at +2 or +3 attack from bulk ups. Sure, I got that one attack drop with Growl, but I also knew at this point my team would get destroyed by Vital Throw. Well, except for Gretchen, that is. It was time to start chipping away at the big, beefy Chungus after that Citrus Berry proc. Our first gust did a surprising amount of damage. I wanted to see how much health we could recover from Absorb, and after my quick experiment, I discovered we mitigate half of Vital Throw's damage with every Absorb. A few turns later, Makuhita succumbed to a full paralysis, but my hope of ending the battle was promptly extinguished after Brawly healed his Pokemon with a Super Potion. Back to square one it is. As yet another gust connected with Makuhita, I was feeling confident that our second gym badge was right around the corner. Unfortunately, this is where I made my first real fucky-wucky of the run. I assumed Makuhita would continue to use Vital Throw and unwittingly set up Gretchen to get absolutely nuked by a supercharged reversal. As I sent in Kick and Wing to finish off the battle, I couldn't help but wonder for the first time in my life, how the hell Makuhita knew reversal when it can't learn it until level 49 and it's not an egg move either? That is literally illegal. Now I had to lock in for real right here because I was looking at a wipe if I didn't clean this mess up quickly. I sent in Nene since she definitely would tank a Vital Throw, and then I conjured up the cheesiest strategy I could think of. Supersonic, Paralysis, possible flinch from Astonish. And of course it broke through the paralysis. The first Astonish comes out, and we didn't need to worry about a flinch because Makuhita just jabbed itself from confusion. Next turn, same result. I switched to Bite the following turn thinking it would do more damage for some reason, and unfortunately I missed out on every bit of hacks that we set up. Now unfortunately for Nene, it's looking like sacrifice time. She fought valiantly, but the reality of the situation is, I just needed a safe switch into my next Pokemon here. Luckily, there would be no more casualties in this battle. Kick-a-Wing avenged his fallen comrades with one final Ember, sealing the victory for our second badge. If I had to pick two team members to get rid of, it would be Gretchen and Nene, but it definitely sucks to lose them. Gretchen and Nene's losses would not be in vain, as their absence allowed me to focus on Pokemon that were actually more worthy of being in my team. Nincada and... what the fuck is it called? Nincada and Slackoth both evolved, and after Zero, the Nincada evolved into Ninjask, I thought I would be a little cheeky and perhaps bend the rules a little bit. I noticed that my new Shedinja's encounter location was also listed as Route 116. So, I boxed Ninjask under the stipulation that since I was kind of bending the rules here, I would not be able to use the Pokemon that I boxed at this juncture. So, by taking Shedinja with me, I guess that means technically Zero counts as the world's first Nuzlocke death that wasn't as a result of battle or poison damage, so that's cool. Once I landed in Slateport, I renamed Shedinja to the very morbid and slightly insulting RIP Zero. North of Slateport on Route 110, I caught myself an Oddish that I named Hector. Hector isn't the greatest encounter of the world, no, but he shows his worth much later in the run, in a battle that I truly did not think he would be a part of. You'll just have to stick around and find out. Now speaking of sticking around, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. It's honestly the best way to support me. Now in preparation for the Watson fight, I decided to dip into my, savings account in order to purchase a TM or two from the Game Corner. But, Brandon, you may be asking yourself, how did you manage to stack this much bread at this point in the game? You see, fairly simple. By rigging this system entirely in my favor, just like the wealthy and the politicians have been doing for decades. Could this be seen as cheating? Maybe. Do I give a Doug Dimsdale a damn? No. As we get into the Watson battle, let me make it clear that I was 100% confident that I would make it through this battle completely deathless. The battle's first action sees Kick-a-Wing eat a Spark and reply with a Flamethrower that just barely missed out on a kill. And then at this point I came to the realization that, hey, this Voltorb here, this guy knows a fun little move called Self-Destruct. And I didn't think Combusken would be able to take that as easily as he took that Spark a second ago. So after Watson's heal causes us to narrowly miss out on a kill again, I decided to send in the perfect Pokemon to deal with that scenario. None other than Hector. You know why? Because fuck that Voltorb, that's why. As Electrike came in, Hector's held Oranberry alleviated a little bit of my mistake, and the following turn just sees Electrike go for a Howl, and I go for a Poison Powder, which poisons the target. Yeah, that's all I've got for that turn, I'm sorry. Afterwards, we get bonked with a critical hit quick attack, but Hector recovers a little bit of HP with an Absorb. The fight was going nowhere, and I finally realized that I literally had one of the most broken Pokemon you could possibly have in a Nuzlocke just patiently sitting in the back, waiting to be unleashed into battle. After a couple turns of using Screech, for reasons that I cannot understand at this point, Rip Zero dispatches Electrike with Fury Cutter, and Magneton gets sent in, and I was like, okay. But then it connected with a 55% accuracy Supersonic. This is the perfect time for me to explain some finer details regarding the Wonder Guard ability. Its most current game text reads, its mysterious power only lets super effective moves hit the Pokemon. Okay, yeah, that part is pretty self-explanatory. But when you look closer at WonderGuard's in-depth effects, it reads, Pokemon is only harmed by super effective damage, weather effects, and condition effects. So, for example, Sandstorm and Hail, Poison and Burn, Leech Seed, and hitting yourself in confusion. You'll never guess what happens next. Lady Luck was not on her side. She just wasn't. The only upside to this is that we get a free switch in the Combusken, who can one-shot Magneton with a flamethrower, albeit being outsped, which was really concerning. Manectric comes in, and I expected a Shockwave, so I switched into Hector because I assumed he would tank the Shockwave. He did, but he almost died, and then at this point in the battle, I just had that gut feeling that something else was gonna go wrong, so I just said fuck it, and I started playing with Reckless Abandon that might cost me the run on any other day. Now, the following turn, after swapping to Unibet, sees her get paralyzed, but luckily for me, I actually got this thing right by putting a Cherry Berry on her. We connect with the Yawn, which meant that I had to hold on for just one more turn. I switched into Wilma because she could definitely survive one attack of whatever was coming out next. I had quite a few different decisions to make in this scenario, and somehow I still managed to fuck it up. My first mistake was using Rock Smash, which basically did nothing. A defense drop was convenient, but I needed damage here. My next mistake was staying in again and using Rock Smash. And then my third and most fatal mistake was staying in for a third opportunity in a row and using Uproar, which outside of locking Wilma in, woke up Manectric. I don't know what type of culinary bullshit I was cooking up in this battle, but I do know it was the type of travesty that would get me banned from every kitchen south of the Mason-Dixon line. Wilma managed to avoid an untimely demise by the skin of her teeth and free herself from Uproar, but things just weren't looking good. I knew I had to get Unibet back in to be able to put Manectric asleep, so that meant I had to sacrifice someone and then risk a crit afterwards from Shockwave just to have a chance to win. Unfortunately for Peep E, this was the only way forward. Vigoroth comes back in, but Manectric just goes for Thunder Wave. Thankfully, we avoid the full paralysis to connect with a Yawn, so now we actually have a fighting chance. We weren't out of the woods yet. I had to survive this next attack, which we did, luckily, and then I could switchly safe in the Combusken. Kick and Wing gets sent in on the first turn of guaranteed sleep, and what follows is nothing short of a miracle that we desperately needed to pull through and win this battle. Manectric stays asleep for 2 turns in a row, which allowed Combusken to torch our opponent with 2 flamethrowers. We won the battle, but it definitely didn't feel like a victory based on what happened. After Watson, I went back to Dewford Town because I realized I actually missed out on 2 absolutely massive encounters from fishing right here. Route 107 and Dewford Town are right next to each other, so I had 2 chances to get some very solid water-type Pokemon. First, I fished up this Tentacool. Tentacruel is a solid option, but more importantly, Species Clause allows me to get a guaranteed Magikarp by fishing in Dewford Town. And this is where things get a little more interesting. And by that I mean absolutely busted. I catch the Magikarp and bestow upon her a name befitting the destruction that she will soon be capable of causing. Everyone, meet our naughty-natured Magikarp, Gojira. Oh man, these NPC trainers have no idea what type of horrors I'm about to put them through. Oh my god. Since we can make our way north of Maulville now, that means a couple more encounters. On Route 112, I catch a Numel named Abraham, and then inside a Fiery Path, I was actually able to catch a Torkoal. Jesus God. So even in Gen 3, I think Torkoal is extremely underrated, and it can be useful in the right circumstances. And then on Route 113, I unfortunately cannot find anything of use. Man, this is so sad. I can't believe Steve Jobs died from Ligma. South of Fall River Town on Route 114, I get a Lombre, which is a pretty solid option to have. Ludicolo is definitely one of those Pokemon that took a few generations to really find its footing, in my opinion, but the typing is really solid, and the option is always there just in case anything catastrophic happens. Now, I'm not going to show anything in Meteor Falls right now because I actually delayed my encounter there for later, and you'll see why. For now, it's Maxi time. I won't show many Team Aqua or Team Magma fights, but I figured this would be a challenge, so I said screw it. And I left it in. The beginning of the fight was simple enough. I lead with Gojira into Maxi's Mightyena, we trade Intimidates, but that wouldn't be too relevant because I just chose to click Dragon Rage. At this point in the game, Dragon Rage is still incredibly strong and can basically just two-shot everything. After that, Maxi Zubat got tackled by Florida Gojira line, and I wanted to conserve as much of Gojira's health as possible, and I honestly forgot what Camera Up knew in the back, so I switched into Wilma here. I had a plan that would render Camera Up pretty much useless. Unibet took some small damage and immediately eliminated Zubat. And as Maxi's final Pokemon came in, this is where I really began to appreciate Unibet a lot more. We used Encore to lock Camera Up into Focus Energy. Now, it might seem a bit overkill to stack Encore with Sleep, but after our fiasco against Watson, I am all about getting those guarantees. And then, yeah, that was the end of the battle pretty much after that a few turns later. After we were done on Mount Chimney, I hopped on over to Jagged Pass where I snagged the Spoink as my encounter. I thought I could make some use out of Rita, but for now, she'd go in the box. Alright, quick team check before Flannery. New team additions include Quinard the Tentacle and Flaquette the Torkoal. Step 1 into Flannery. Lead with Quinard. Step 2. Murder her Numa with a large amount of bubbles. Step 3. Decide to not use Bubble Beam for some reason and miss a Supersonic, which allows Light Screen to get set up. And to atone for my mistake, I decided to stall out Light Screen. Now, it seemed like a solid idea, and I really thought I'd be successful, but that was until Slugman decided to set up Sunny Day, and I was like, oh shit, that's not good. Now, I plan to stall out the Light Screen and the Sun involved keeping Flaquette in to soak up any potential overheats, but once she got poisoned, the plans needed some reshuffling. I knew that with Flaquette's stellar defense stat and Slugman's piss-poor everything stat, I would have time to set up with Curse even with the poison tick damage. Luckily for us, Light Screen wore off and Flannery just kept doing almost nothing with Smog, and I just set up another curse with no consequence. The following turn spelled the end of Slugman's poor, pathetic existence on this planet, but unfortunately, I had a habit of creating my own problems, and it reared its ugly head again as I decided to protect. Camerupt literally cannot hurt me with its damaging moves, but it can hurt me by setting up the Sun. Well, time to risk a crit again. I sent in Quinard expecting an overheat, and to her credit, she tanked a sun-boosted overheat. She got some health back from an Oranberry, but I wasn't taking any chances, so I switched into Gogina Davis. After an Intimidate, Camerup's tackle did nothing, and then Gojira absolutely dominated Camerup in the next sequence, and rightfully so. We got a bit lucky with a bite flinch right there, but when Camerup can't make use of a track, it's just lights out at that point. When Torkoal came out, I had an idea, and I needed her to use Sunny Day, which she did. I've never really had Encore in one of my Pokemon outside of various competitive teams, but this definitely illustrated how useful and honestly broken Encore can be in a Nuzlocke. This is a game changer. Unibet's work was done, so I sent Gojira back in, and yeah, the end of the battle was as simple as 1, 2, and 3. And that's the 4th gym badge. Actually won in convincing style. Before we get into Norman, there was an encounter in the desert, but it wasn't one that managed to get into my team at any point, so we move. Alright, Norman fight. Unibet is our lead-off hitter. I started off with a yawn because I know a teeter dance is coming at some point, and I don't want to be dealing with all that nonsense if I'm being perfectly honest, so after we got confused and Spinda fell asleep, I switch into Combuskin, who takes out Spinda with 1 hit from Double Kick. Vigoroth comes out next, and I knew I'd have to play around with this one a little bit, so I sent in Gojira to get an Intimidate off. We got some big RNG help on the next turn after an unfortunate crit, as our secret power paralyzes. My lord and savior RNGesus inflicted full paralysis on the switch. Even though I was staring at a crit possibility like always, I stayed in. That's because as long as I could get through Vigoroth and Linu with Flaquette, it was pretty much a guaranteed win. Vigoroth's final act was a feint attack that left our turtle at just over 50% health before getting body slammed in the next week. Linoon was up next, and I debated with myself whether or not I should try to one-shot with body slam, or to use flamethrower so I didn't trigger a heal. I decided for the body slam, which did a ton of damage. It wasn't enough for the knockout, and Norman used the next turn as an opportunity to heal, which was fine by me because that just meant more free damage with body slam. But then he healed again. Lady Luck once again graced us with her presence, this time with Linoon falling victim to a full paralysis, resulting in his demise. Slacking finally comes out, and at this point, victory was pretty much a formality. That's because all I had to do was abuse our opponent's Truant ability, the hallmark of the Slacking evolutionary line, outside of Vigoroth obviously. Every turn that Slacking could actually use an attack, Flaquette would protect, and on the subsequent turn, I had a free turn because Slacking could only live for round. For as powerful as Slacking can be, you can abuse this ability. And yeah, a few turns later, we landed a final blow with a body slam to get a hold of our next gym badge in what was probably the easiest boss battle so far. As we made our way to Four Tree City, there were a few encounters we had access to, but the only relevant one was this Carvana. And there were obviously a couple mandatory story things like the Weather Institute and the rival fight, but neither of them were any cause for concern, so I won't waste any time talking about them. Our next big battle, however, was a little bit concerning, and justifiably so. Winona's Altaria can be a run killer if you're not careful, but our first order of business was taking out this Swablu. Power Stone was fine by me. I mean, that's a free kill right there. I didn't want to play around too much as Winona brought in her Tropius, so I switched Unibet out for Flaquette. Our opponent's Aerial Ace barely left the mark, and then a couple turns later, Tropius got absolutely annihilated by a critical hit sun-boosted flamethrower. Someone might have to check on Tropius to see if it's even alive after that. Winona sends out Pelipper next, and she tried to ruin my day with some confusion shenanigans, but luckily that did not happen. Before this turn, Pelipper used Protect, so obviously nothing came from it. I tried the KO with Body Slam, but it barely missed. The sun expired, and I wasn't going to risk a critical hit water gun because that would more than likely kill her. On Wilma's first turn, Pelipper protected again, and on the following turn, Winona tried her luck with a double protect. Since I figured she would keep spamming protect, I took the opportunity to use a Howl. Pelipper then gets a crit from water gun because fuck me, I guess, and we miss out on a kill from strength by about 1 HP because, again, fuck me, I guess. I didn't want to risk Wilma's life without a reason, so I swapped in the Quinard, and then a couple turns later, we took out Pelipper from the battle. It was at this point that Winona finally brought out one of the biggest run killers of this game. Even with adequate preparation, this fluffy little demon can wreak havoc on players. I knew I had to be extra cautious and really think things through. Now, luckily, Quinnar would bait an Earthquake and give an easy switch into Gojira. Now, the most logical thing was to start inflicting damage. I could have gotten lucky with Secret Power and tried to paralyze, but at the same time, I was risking Gojira to paralysis from Dragon Breath. The other issue is that she already used Dragon Dance, and there was a good chance that she was already faster than all of my Pokemon because of it. With my options running low, and late game team conservation in mind, I sent Wilma back in. She would die a noble death in the name of the Nuzlocke. I sent Unibet back in because my only hope of winning was to put Altaria to sleep. I then made probably the dumbest switch in the history of Pokemon because if either the Sharpedo got hit with an Earthquake or a critical hit Dragon Breath, I would have been burnt toast. I used Screech here to prepare to switch out the Gyarados, but Winona just switched out the Skarmory next turn and she made me look really dumb. My plan went out the window, but I'm always down for some improvising. We traded attacks and damage for a couple turns, and when Skarmory got in the healing range, I switched out Gojira into Quinard. I had something brewing in my head. An idea that wasn't the greatest thing in the world by any means, but you gotta remember, I'm a rookie Nuzlocker, okay? The bar is still on the floor for me. Winona sends in Altaria, now cured of sleep because of Natural Cure, and because I have absolutely massive cojones, we connect with a Supersonic and get a full Confusion. To finish off the battle, I switch Gojira back in, and luckily for me, Altaria hit herself in Confusion for a second turn in a row. Realistically, she got baited into an Earthquake that wouldn't have damaged Gojira anyway, so it was just a matter of not getting hit by a crit or a full paralysis on the next turn. And at this stage of the run, you've probably seen my luck enough to know that I am in fact never punished. That's actually a lie, and all of my dead team members would beg to differ, but it doesn't matter because our 6th gym badge is now locked up and secured. After Winona was finished off, I did the new Maulville side quest so I could get a free Thunderbolt TM and an encounter. Our encounter turned out to be a ticking time bomb, but luckily it didn't decide to go boom, and I was able to put it to sleep. Behind Blunderbuss's angry demeanor, he's just a bashful fellow who's going to be an invaluable partner down the stretch. Electric types are so important to have for the Wallace battle if you don't decide to just cheese the game with Rayquaza. Next up on Mount Pyre, I went running around in the grass looking for Ghost, specifically a Duskull. I didn't find one, but I found a Shuppet, which is cool considering I've never used one of these in my playthroughs either. I shall call him Birmingham. The next bit of action isn't really action so much as it is a distraction. The Magma and Aqua hideouts were just a joke, and I don't think a single team member dropped below half health in the entire time. And since we were finally in Moss Deep, I found the NPC that carries a Sunstone, which meant I was finally able to complete Hector's transformation from a dopey weed into an absolute bad bitch. I also got the Super Rod and used it to fish myself up a core fish. I didn't think I needed, but it's cool to have. Checking in on the team before the Tate and Liza fight, and we're looking a little bit different. Not that it really matters because I only needed 2 Pokemon for this fight anyway. The funny thing is that I always had trouble with Tate and Liza as a kid. I realize now I might have just been stupid. On the first turn, Claydol got double teamed and could not handle the dynamic duo that is PD and Unibet. Claydol going down meant that Solrock came in next, and Zatu's idea of avenging his teammates was to just simply be zen. Now the battle showed me that Slacking's ability is honestly not a problem whatsoever in the main playthrough, but besides that, it also helps to have a Sharpedo that can just nuke Solrock with a single crunch. One thing I will say is that if I were actually EV training my Pokemon here, I could probably have taken them out in like 1 or 2 moves apiece, but you know, it is what it is. It's fine. Now, the rest of the battle was just a walk in the park. I toyed around with Zatu a little bit, and honestly, I'm surprised it never went for Psychic in the Unibet in that whole time. That was a missed opportunity for the twins, but at the end of the day, only one of us can be punished for our mistakes. And it wasn't going to be me this time. That's badge number 7. Up next was more pettiness and interference from Teak Magma at the Space Center. As per usual, they got their asses spanked. This time, with the help of the former champion alongside me. To be fair to Maxie and Tabitha, they did get enough damage on Unibet and Gojira to get them to about 75% health. Maybe next time they'll do a little bit better. After that is the final battle with Team Aqua and Archie, where once again, a grown-ass man who's got a fish fetish gets bested in mythical creature combat by a little kid. After that, the world starts to end. Land and Sea Titan clash in Sotopolis. Magical green space noodle comes crashing out of the sky and tells Groudon and Kyogre to fuck off. Blah, 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 save the world, yada, 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 and now we're off to face Juan for the final gym badge. I went with the simplest lead possible, big ol' blunderbuss. We made quick work of Love Disc with a single Thunderbolt, which prompted Juan to send in Whiscash. My answer to that was to send in every ground and water Pokemon's worst nightmare. The following turn, Whiscash tried to buff its special defense with Amnesia, but Hector wasn't having any of that crap. A critical hit Giga Drain sends Whiscash into the Shadow Realm. Juan sent Celio out next, and I had to let my nuts hang. I kept Hector in battle because I know damn well he can hack an Aurora Beam, and we connect with a Sleep Powder. There's a reason why I wanted this over damage right here. I was basically testing the waters here. If I didn't get a KO with Giga Drain, which, spoiler alert, I didn't, I was going to switch back out in the Blunderbuss. So on Juan's healing turn, I switched out, and on the following turn set up a light screen. I figured it was time to stop screwing around, so I wanted to finish the job on Celio. Juan's Crawdaunt met the same fate from a Thunderbolt, and then Juan was down to his final Pokemon, one of my favorite water types in Kingdra. A Thunderbolt acts as a little litmus test, but the main issue was this bastard and his double teams. Now, double team is normally just slightly inconvenient, but in this battle, you can fall victim to some serious bullshit if you're not careful. I had a few tricks up my sleeve, though. One of the strategies was to lull it to sleep with Yawn, because common sense dictates if you're asleep you can't do anything. I switched out the Blunderbuss, and at this point, Kingdra decided to use its third double team. I didn't know how that math would work out, but I figured at this point, it would be pretty hard to hit my attacks. After that, I actually switched into Kickin' Wing as Kingdra took a sleep turn. Now, the whole sequence was a friggin' fiasco because I found out that 1, Kingdra was faster than Blaziken, and 2, Aerial Ace didn't do fucking shit. Even though I knew I'd have to climb a mountain just to be able to hit Kingdra with an attack, I knew I could actually use his boosted evasion to my advantage. I sent in Rita for her team debut, and on her first turn, she used Psych Up to copy the double team stat changes. Now, it seemed like things were turning in my favor as Kingdra missed Ice Beam and we connected with Confuse Ray. I taught Shockwave to Rita pretty much just for this battle, and let's just say I was disappointed by my return on investment, but I did gain a valuable piece of information when I saw how much Psychic did. Now, what transpired after that sequence would be the single most wretched and disgusting and vile 10 minutes of gameplay that had me questioning my sanity. I would hit a couple attacks, get Kingdra's HP down, then it would use rest. It was an absolute nightmare because whenever I would get close, I would have to start all over again. But after about 300 years of pain and suffering, we finally managed to get a critical hit Spark and then connect with a Thunderbolt on the following turn to seal our 8th gym badge and finally get some relief from double team tomfoolery for one day. Well, there's actually one thing I forgot to mention before we get into the Elite Four. Remember earlier in the video when I said I delayed my Meteor Falls encounter? Well, I decided to capitalize on the Zubat that we caught earlier in Granite Cave, Rip Nene by the way, and I ventured into the deepest and most hidden part of Meteor Falls in order to capture an absolute juggernaut of a Pokemon. That's right, folks. We managed to get a friggin' Bagon as our Meteor Falls encounter. Fortisax is an impish, young dragon hatchling with dreams of one day being able to take flight and soar to new heights. Will he be able to reach his lofty goals in this Nuzlocke? Maybe. Before we get into the Elite Four, there were a couple key events that took place in Victory Road. The first one was that we absolutely slaughtered Wally, it wasn't even close. And the second one is that PD fucking died in some random double battle against some cool trainers. I mean, it's not the end of the world because PD's shelf life kind of ran its course, but Jesus Christ, like, who in their right mind actually loses a Pokemon at this stage in the game? Well, there's no time to dwell on it. We've got shit to do. Before we begin the Elite Four onslaught, here's a quick rundown of the team. All leveled up to the cap of 55 to match Drake's Salamence, we see 2 new faces in addition to the stalwarts that have been holding it down for the majority of the campaign. It took me a little while to decide who would fill in the 6th slot, and I finally settled on Birmingham after careful consideration. Obstacle number 1, Dark-type Specialist Sydney. I think I'd be a fool not to lead with Blaziken on this one. It's only right that he gets first taste of elite action. Our Brick Break didn't manage to KO Mightyena, but fortunately he fell victim to recoil damage from Double Edge. Shiftry was up next, and while he can normally be Sydney's easiest Pokemon to deal with, I hit a snag on account of Kickin' Wing not being able to finish his damn dinner. And on 2 separate occasions, Shiftry got left with 1 HP in a dream, and honestly looking back, I should have tried to set up bulk ups on Mightyena. With Blaziken confused and an extra sensory probably coming out, I switched into Fortisax. I thought I'd be able to end this easily, but, you know, apparently Shiftry has a friggin' Bright Powder. Yeah, honestly, I don't think I've ever seen that happen to me in this fight, which is weird, but, you know, regardless, Unibet finally got rid of Shiftry after a couple more turns. On Unibet's loafing turn, Cacturne hit us with a Cotton Spore, which is hilarious considering we were still faster on the next turn and connected with a Yawn. Kickin' Wing came back in on a weak Needle Arm, and then I took advantage of Cacturne's nap time to set up with 2 bulks. The jury was still out on on whether or not it would be smart to keep Kicking Wing in against Absol later, because a critical hit Aerial Ace would definitely take us out, and I didn't foresee us being faster. Cacturne woke up and used Cotton Spore, and I knew for a fact that we weren't going to outspeed now. Moving after a Cacturne is usually a sign that you're slow as shit. Once Absol entered the field, I sent in Gojira because she was just plain and simply my best way of dealing with it. Thankfully, my misplays didn't really matter too much in this battle, considering Sid the Kid isn't exactly the best. I sent in Birmingham to deal with Crawdaunt, and the overgrown Crawfish died to a single Thunderbolt. Not a bad first round. Phoebe's ghost types are normally pretty tricky to deal with, but Birmingham has a chance to seal himself in the Hall of Fame. Dusclops protected on the first turn, but on the next turn we actually got a pretty funny KO. A Shadow Ball barely missed on the knockout, but then Dusclops was like, alright, I'ma head out. It wasn't all fun and games though, because the clock was ticking on Banette's life from that curse. But I guess the clock was also ticking for Phoebe's Banette. This dude single-handedly took out Phoebe's first 3 Pokemon. Once the second Dusclops came in and Birmingham fell to a quarter health, it was time to switch. I went for a yawn at first, probably because I was being overly cautious, and once I saw how little damage Earthquake did, I knew this was a wrap. A couple turns later, Dusclops was dispatched by a Shadow Ball. Phoebe's final Pokemon, Sableye, didn't manage to do anything other than set up a double team, so to speed things up, I sent in Kick a Wing and took it out with a couple Aerial Aces. That was fairly simple. Let's see if we can keep this momentum going in the round 3. Even though I had some pretty good answers in the Glacia's team, this is where things get harder. Celio pretty much always goes for Hail on turn 1, so I knew I could safely yawn with little to no repercussions. I probably should have kept Unibet in battle for an extra turn before my planned switch into Kick and Wing, but then again, Cherry Berries exist and I didn't use one here. Celio was asleep and couldn't do any harm, and luckily, Blaziken fought through Paralysis and picked up the KO with Brick Break. Glacia immediately sends in her ace Walrein, and I knew Kick and Wing had to come out. Since Walrein sees the kill with Surf, I switched into Gojira to absorb damage and think of my next move. When in doubt, switch into Unibet, tank an Ice Beam, and simply use Yawn. Unfortunately, things got a little complicated after Walrein's Ice Beam freezed us, and I had to think of a way to stall out one more turn now. I was hoping Walrein would decide to use Surf on the next turn, and thankfully it did. Just like before, we safely absorbed the damage, and with Walrein asleep, I could finally take care of it. I sent in Blunderbuss, I set up a light screen, and then I went to work. Thunderbolt wouldn't be enough to pick up the kill, and Walrein woke up, but our opponent's Citrus Berry ensured that she'd be out of healing range, sealing her fate on the following turn with a second Thunderbolt. Glacia sent in Glalie number 1, and we kept the offense rolling with a Thunderbolt that gets a huge Paralysis, ensuring that we'll move first on the next turn in spite of that Icy Wind speed drop. Yeah, that crit was absolutely overkill. Celio number 2 comes out, and Light Screen expires, so I set up a fresh one as Celio wasted a turn with Hail. The following turn was a little bit scary because Thunderbolt barely missed out on the KO, and I think Double Edge probably would have killed with a crit. As Glacia's final Pokemon came in, I was in a rough spot. Electrode's health was low enough that Glalie would see a kill with a random move, and I knew one of my team members would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. And after some quick consideration, I knew that Birmingham would be the one to lay his life down in the name of our victory. Honestly, I don't feel too bad about losing Birmingham here because he was already a ghost. I mean, it's not like he can die again. And, yeah, I just want to get this one out the way really quickly because, yeah, basically, I'm a little bit slow, and, I don't want to dwell on this, and let's just, you know, acknowledge my mistake and get it out the way, but, yeah, I'm in absolute shambles. I lost the Salamence in a Nuzlocke. That is just pure poverty. But, yeah, if there's one good thing to come from this battle, it's that we managed to win it. Woohoo! Victory is mine! I can't believe I lost the fucking Salamence, dude. What the hell is wrong with me? Oh, yeah, by the way, I don't know if I've mentioned this or not because I've been sitting recording this for a little while now, but if you're still watching the video at this point, give yourself a pat on the back. I appreciate you. Anyways, Unibet took some damage from Dragon Claw on her loafing turn, but then she dealt a huge blow with Return. I swapped in Gojira on a pretty soft Rock Tomb post-attack drop from Intimidate, and then on the following turn took out Shelgon with an Ice Beam. Drake apparently came to play because he immediately brought out Salamence after that. Now, this next sequence is funny because not only did Unibet just eat Rock Slide like it was nothing, but apparently she's also faster than a freaking Salamence? Like, hello? Does no one see how ridiculous that is, or is that just me? After that, I went for a, interesting move, to say the least, by sending out Electrode. What can I say? I'm addicted to Light Screen. Afterwards, I sent in Gojira as Salamence took its first sleep turn. Then as Salamence continued to nap, I set up a Dragon Dance, mainly for the speed boost. Well, I mean, that's a lie. I was also thinking about Kingdra waiting in the back, because I didn't know if a non-boosted Earthquake would two-shot, and I wanted to prepare for that. Everything was fine, though, after the Citrus Berries kicked in. We were faster now, so we sent Salamence packing with another Ice Beam. We got some help with Altaria from RNGesus with that freeze, so the fluffy burb didn't cause us too much trouble. Kingdra wasted its only chance to attack with a Dragon Dance, and he fell to 2 Earthquakes. And finally, Drake's Flygon fell to a combo of Surf and Ice Beam that probably should have just been one Ice Beam, but I don't know what kind of shit I was on. That may be true that I have been making questionable decisions, but the fact is that we have made it here face to face with Hoenn's champion Wallace as a direct result of our determination, trials, tribulations, and everything in between. Everything that has happened before is irrelevant now. We have one more job to do. It's win or go home. I lead with Blunderbuss, whose first mission is to launch a Thunderbolt at Wailord and deal catastrophic damage. Lady Luck graces us once again and allows us to avoid Blizzard, which means we can set up a Light Screen with 0 risk. A second Thunderbolt cracks the sky, nearly ending Wailord and giving us the advantage. But I had nothing to worry about since he just went for Rain Dance, meaning a Spark would dispatch Wailord on the following turn. Wallace sends in Gyarados, and I think we all know what happens next. Whiscash comes out next, and I knew it was time to pivot, and I have the perfect counter. I mean, fair play to Wallace for reading my switch and not going for Earthquake. Not that Amnesia's gonna help him here, but, you know. There is only one thing left for Gojira to do. Dance! And after 3 of those Dragon Dances, Gorgina began her offensive onslaught against her opponent. And Ice Beam finally finished off Whiscash. I'm surprised I got that right the first time. And then Gojira absolutely decimated Tentacruel with an Earthquake. Gongina barely missed out on my Milotic one-shot and got afflicted with Toxic. But a couple turns after Wallace healed, Gojira managed to finish her dinner. She was tired, she was hurting, but she was on a 3-kill streak and she was about to get her UAV, so I wanted to keep the ball rolling on this bloodbath that was happening. Look at how much damage a resisted Earthquake does. But then I got a little too cute and I wanted to finish the battle off with Gojira. And, yeah. Sorry, Gojira, that's my bad. Even though we lost to Gojira, she absolutely cemented her place in the Hall of Fame team, as most Gyaradoses tend to do. And in poetic fashion, we win the same way we started off the run, with Kick and Wing. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Flock, shouldn't this be the end of the run? Well, yes and no. We beat the champion, which usually signals the end of the run in most cases, but there's one more trainer that we have yet to conquer in battle, and I think you all know who that person is. Now, obviously, we lost a few team members during the Elite Four run, so some replacements had to be drafted in, and I think they might come as a surprise. One thing I want to put out there is that I accidentally overleveled Kick and Wing, and I didn't feel like fixing that, so he was just going to sit this one out. The 3 new additions for this team are returning comrades Flockhead, Quinard, and Hector. Into the true final test of Pokemon Emerald against Steven, and we lead with Blunderbuss. First turn, Thunderbolt picks up an easy knockout on Skarmory, and Electrode's work was pretty much done in this battle, so I used Light Screen expecting him to get murked, but Aggron just started charging his Solar Beam, which meant I could switch into my secret weapon for the fight. Hector. Next turn, Aggron did what he should have done against Electrode and went for Earthquake, but all that he got for that was Sleep Powder. Never in my life did I think I'd see a Blossom deal that much damage to a frickin' Aggron with one move. Oh my god. Following a devastating Solar Beam, Steven healed Aggron, which gave me the opportunity to use Giga Drain and get Hector back to tip-top shape. A few turns later, Aggron was in the same predicament as before, only this time, Solar Beam was enough to pick up the knockout. Armaldo is next, and after dealing a huge blow to Hector, it gets put to sleep by a Sleep Powder. I used Giga Drain to test out our damage output and decided I'd be better off switching to more firepower, which meant Blunderbuss. And then I used Spark. I don't know why I didn't use Thunderbolt. And then I decided to use Explosion on the next turn because I thought it would be funny. Did I need to do it? Not really, but to be fair, Blunderbuss was finally able to live up to his name. I salute you, Blunderbuss. Claydol was a piece of cake to take down with Unibet's Ice Beams, and then things finally got serious when Steven brought out his signature Metagross, but luckily for us, we didn't take any damage on Unibet's Loafing turn. Next turn, I steered the odds ever so slightly in our favor with Yawn, but then Metagross was able to connect with a huge Meteor Mash. That was my cue to switch out, this time in the Flockette, who held up pretty well against a resisted Meteor Mash. And then, yeah, it was just one Flamethrower, followed by another one to finish Metagross off on the next turn. As we get into the final sequence of events, let me just say, to all my Torkoal fans out there, I'm sorry I wasn't part of the fan club earlier. Flockette didn't see much action compared to the other team members, but if it wasn't for her, I don't think we would have even made it past Flannery. And as we land one final crit to end the battle against Steven, let me just say thank you to all of you who stuck around to this part of the video. Well, my first successful Nuzlocke is finally, officially in the books. I had a great time doing this, and honestly, it's something I should have been doing in Pokemon games for a long time now because it adds a whole new level of enjoyment to the games that I haven't felt in a long time. If you enjoyed the video, I'd greatly appreciate a like, or perhaps even a sub to get those YouTube algorithmic juices flowing. More Nuzlockes will be following, as well as my eventual return to Elden Ring videos, and a whole bunch of different shit, so stay tuned. That's all for me for today. I've been Flock of Turtles, you've been amazing, and I'll see you next time. See you guys later.